Welcome back to the trading floor. I'm David Axtell. This is episode 11, and today we're getting into the part that most finance textbooks skip. Not what a forward contract is, we covered that. Not how it's priced, we covered that too. Today is about how you actually use these instruments inside a corporation, how you build a hedging program that works in the real world. Before I start, I would like to apologise about the quality of the latest episodes that have shown some glitches. We are trying to fix those issues, upgrading our microphones. So, thank you for your understanding and bear with us while we sort these issues out. Because a forward contract is just a tool, what matters is the framework around it. And that framework starts with one question: what are you trying to protect? Every corporation with international operations faces three types of FX exposure: transaction exposure, translation exposure, and economic exposure. They're different. They require different responses. And most companies only manage one of them properly. Transaction exposure is the simplest to understand. You've got a committed cash flow in a foreign currency. A European manufacturer buying components from the United States has a $10 million invoice due in 90 days. That's a transaction exposure. Known amount, known currency, known date. You can hedge it precisely with a forward contract matching those exact terms. This is the exposure that gets hedged most consistently, and it should be. It hits your profit and loss directly. Translation exposure is different. This is the accounting effect of consolidating foreign subsidiaries into your group accounts. If you're a UK parent company with a US subsidiary, the subsidiary's balance sheet gets translated into sterling at each reporting date. When the dollar moves, your consolidated equity moves. Not because anything economic has changed, but because the accounting rules say so. Most companies don't hedge translation exposure. It's non-cash. It flows through other comprehensive income, not through earnings. And hedging it creates real cash costs to protect against a paper effect. There are exceptions. If you've got debt covenants tied to consolidated ratios, translation moves can matter. But for most corporates, it's not worth the hedging cost. Economic exposure is the hardest. This is the impact of exchange rate movements on your competitive position. A Japanese car manufacturer selling into the US market faces economic exposure. If the yen strengthens 10%, their dollar revenues buy fewer yen. Margins compress. But it's worse than that. Their American competitors now have a cost advantage. Market share shifts. Pricing power erodes. You can't fully hedge economic exposure with forward contracts. It's too broad, too long-term, too uncertain. The real response is operational. Diversify your supply chain. Match revenue currencies with cost currencies. Adjust pricing. Financial hedging can buy you time, but the strategic response has to be operational. Right, so most corporate hedging programs focus on transaction exposure, known cash flows, quantifiable risk. Let me walk you through how a well-designed program actually works. The foundation is a hedging policy, a formal, board-approved document that establishes the rules. What gets hedged, how much, with which instruments, who has authority to execute, and critically, how performance gets measured. Without a policy, you've got individuals making ad hoc decisions. Sometimes they hedge, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they take a view on the currency. That's not risk management. That's speculation with a corporate treasury badge. A good hedging policy specifies hedge ratio targets, and the smartest approach is graduated ratios that decline with forecast certainty. Here's a real example. A US technology company with €2.5 billion in annual European sales, their policy looks like this. Current quarter. Committed orders, 100% hedged, no discretion. These are firm contractual obligations with known amounts and dates. Standard forwards matching exact invoice dates. Next quarter. Firm forecasts based on confirmed orders, 80% hedged. High confidence these exposures will materialise, but not contractually certain yet. Rolling monthly forwards. Quarter 3. Pipeline forecasts. 60% hedged. Good visibility, but timing and amounts less certain. quarterly forward execution, perhaps with some participating forwards to maintain upside if the forecast doesn't fully materialise. Quarter 4. Trend-based estimates, 40% hedged, lower certainty, zero cost collars defining an acceptable range, or simply leaving a portion unhedged. Added up, 625 million hedged at 100%, 500 million at 80, 375 at 60, 250 at 40. Total hedge position, 1.75 billion euros. Overall coverage, 70% of the annual forecast, weighted by certainty. That's elegant, and it works because it aligns hedge coverage with how confident you are that the exposure actually exists. Why not just hedge everything at 100%? 2 reasons. First, cost. Forward points and option premiums are real money. If you hedge a forecast exposure at 100% and the order gets cancelled or delayed, you've created a speculative position. You're now long or short a currency with no offsetting commercial flow. That's the opposite of what hedging is supposed to do. Second, flexibility. Markets move, business changes. A rigid 100% hedge everything policy removes the ability to adapt. The graduated approach balances protection with pragmatism. Now let me talk about rolling hedge programs. Because many corporations don't have one-off exposures, they have recurring monthly flows. Take a US pharmaceutical company receiving 50 million euros every month from European drug sales. Payment arrives 90 days after shipment. Every month, like clockwork. A rolling program works like this. Each month, you execute forwards hedging the exposures 3 to 6 months out. As the nearest hedge matures and settles, you add a new one at the far end. The program rolls continuously. Month 1, you hedge months 4, 5 and 6. Month 2, the month 4 hedge matures and settles, you add a new hedge for month 7. Month 3, month 5 settles, you add month 8, and so on, indefinitely. The beauty of this structure is threefold. Continuous coverage, every receivable is protected before it even arises, smooth execution, you're distributing your forward purchasing across time, reducing market impact, and budget certainty. You know your conversion rates months in advance. The cost? Forward points vary slightly across the roll cycle, maybe 5 to 10 pips difference between rolls. But for a company that values predictability, that's a small price for continuous protection. Let me talk about something that goes wrong more often than it should: performance measurement. How do you measure whether your hedging program is working? This sounds simple. It isn't. The wrong way to measure is comparing your hedged rate to the spot rate at settlement. Every quarter, someone in finance or on the board will look at the numbers and say, we locked in 1.08, but spot settled at 1.12. We left 4 cents on the table. We lost money on the hedge. No, you didn't lose money. You bought certainty. The forward did exactly what it was supposed to do. It eliminated the risk that Euro USD could have gone to 1.02, which would have cost you 3 times more than the 4 cents you think you missed. Comparing hedge rates to spot outcomes is like cancelling your car insurance because you didn't have an accident. The value of the hedge was the certainty it provided at the time you put it on, not what happened afterwards. The right metrics focus on process, not outcome. Hedge coverage ratio. Are you within 5 percentage points of your policy targets? Budget variance. Are your actual conversion rates within 2% of budgeted rates for 90% of transactions? Hedge effectiveness. Are your dollar offset ratios between 80 and 125% for accounting qualification and cost of hedging? Are your forward points and option premiums reasonable relative to peers? These tell you whether the program is functioning as designed, which is the only question that matters. One more topic: instrument selection beyond vanilla forwards. Most corporate programs rely heavily on standard forwards, 80% or more. And that's sensible. Forwards are simple, zero premium, clean accounting treatment. Both sides know exactly what they're getting. But there are situations where other structures make sense. Window forwards. Instead of a fixed settlement date, you get a window. Settle any time between the 15th of March and the 15th of April. Useful when you know the exposure is coming but the exact timing is uncertain. Slightly wider pricing than a standard forward, but operationally much more flexible. Participating forwards. You lock in a worst-case rate but retain participation, typically 50% in favourable moves. If the market moves your way, you benefit from half of it. Useful for forecast exposures where you want protection, but aren't certain the exposure will materialise at full size. There is a cost though. Your protected rate is worse than a standard forward. Zero-cost collars. You buy a put option at your worst-case level and sell a call option at your best-case level. The premium from selling the call pays for the put. Zero upfront cost. You're protected within a range. Below the floor, you're hedged. Above the cap, you give up the upside. Between the two, you transact at spot. Collars work well for longer-dated, less certain exposures. They define an acceptable budget range without consuming treasury budget on premiums. The key insight with instrument selection is matching the instrument to the exposure characteristics. Committed, certain, date-specific, standard forward, certain amount, but flexible timing. Window forward, uncertain whether exposure materializes, participating forward or collar. Simple framework, effective results. Let me wrap up with something I've learned the hard way over 35 years. The best hedging programs are boring. They run on process, not personality. The treasurer doesn't need to be a currency expert. They need discipline. Follow the policy, execute the program. Measure the results. Report to the board. Repeat. The companies that get into trouble are the ones that treat treasury like a profit center, encouraging their treasurers to take views on currencies, timing the market, essentially speculating with corporate cash flows. I worked with a client once who had massive dollar receivables. They hedged everything immediately, religiously. Every invoice, hedged the day it was booked. Their bank knew this, and I'm quite certain they were getting worse pricing because their flow was entirely predictable. We convinced them to introduce some flexibility. Layer the hedges over a few days. Vary the tenors. Use options occasionally instead of forwards. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make their flow less transparent to their banking counterparties. Their execution costs improve noticeably. That's the practical side. Not just what to hedge and how much, but how to execute intelligently within your policy framework. Next episode, we tackle something that makes most treasury professionals groan: hedge accounting, IAS 39, IFRS 9, ASC 815. The accounting frameworks that determine whether your hedge gains and losses end up in the right place on your financial statements. It sounds dry. But getting it wrong can create exactly the earnings volatility your hedging program was supposed to prevent. This is The Trading Floor. I'm David Axtell. The book that underpins this series, FX Cash Products by Luigi Rondinini and myself, covers corporate hedging applications in full institutional detail, worked examples, policy templates, instrument comparisons, available through Rondinini Publishing. For professional mini-manuals and production-ready Python tools covering hedge ratio optimization, rolling program design, and exposure analytics, visit learn.rondinini.com. These are practitioner tools built for real treasury operations. And for corporate treasury teams needing consultancy on hedging, policy design, execution strategy, or counterparty management, I work with clients through axtellconsulting.net. 35 years building and managing FX operations. If I can help your organization, reach out. See you in episode 12.